Lift it up. Yeah. I love that song. I hadn't heard it in a while, so thank you. Good morning. I'm happy to be here this morning. Reverend Cherie and Graham are on vacation, and we bless them and know that they're enjoying their time away. We are in the middle of a talk series based on the book, The Illusion of Money by Kyle Cease. And last week, Reverend Cherie talked about value and how valuable we are and recognizing that value. First and foremost, by accepting wherever we are in this now moment, which sometimes isn't easy to do. You know, even if we think we're not enough or we don't have enough, to be able to be okay with wherever we are in this now moment. One of the chapters of this book is called I Love My Current Bank Account. So how many of you love your current bank account? Good, I see a few hands out there. You know, money seems to be one of those things we find difficult to talk about, especially in church for some reason. And yet, you know, it's the vehicle of exchange we're using. And it's interesting how much energy we have about the stuff, and we give it all the energy and meaning it has. You know, it doesn't mean anything to anyone else. You can leave it on the floor. Trust me, your pets will probably eat it. Doesn't mean anything to them. Money and everything else in our lives only has whatever meaning we give to it. And one of the lessons of A Course in Miracle, in fact, the very first lesson in A Course in Miracle, is nothing in this room means anything. It only has the meaning that we give to it. And in fact, the same objects can have different meaning for different people. There was a woman who lost her contact lens down the kitchen sink, and she spent about 45 minutes looking for it. She went through the coffee grinds and the garbage, and she looked. She wasn't really worried. She kind of wanted a new pair, you know, those blue tinted ones. But she did spend time looking for it, and eventually she went to her husband and said, you know, honey, I looked for it and I just can't find it. I guess we'll have to buy me another pair. Well, he got up, went into the kitchen. 5 minutes later, came back, he had found it. She said, how did you do that? I said, I don't understand how you did that. And he goes, it's easy. You were looking for a little piece of plastic. I was looking for $150. So even though we think we're talking about money, really we're talking about prosperity. And the first thing we have to know about prosperity is we have to be clear about what it is we're looking for, and then realize we already have it. And the trouble is sometimes we're confused about what it is we think we need. There was a man who was ragged and appeared to be without anything in a physical sense, and he came upon a road boss. And he said to him, can you help me? I need work. And the boss said, well, fine. If work is what you need, take that big boulder up over there and roll it up and down the hill. And that should fulfill your need. And the man said, well, you don't understand. What I really need is money. And so the boss said, well, okay, if money's what you need, here's $50, but you can't spend it. And so the man is really perplexed by this time, and he said, well, you see, what I really need is food and clothing and shelter, not just, fuel, not just money. And the man said, well, if you're so sure that that's what you need, then spend the money on food and fuel and clothing, but don't eat the food or use the fuel or wear the clothing. And so then man was really forced to look at what he really needed, which was a sense of security and peace and inner satisfaction. All totally invisible, all within the mind, and all within divine sustenance. So everything we need can be found within. We already have it. We just have to change our belief system that says we are lacking, which moves us into another factor of prosperity consciousness, which is you can't create prosperity if you believe in lack. We have to get rid of that consciousness that says, when my ship comes in, when I get that raise, when I win the lottery, or whatever your win is. We all have our wins. We don't have to figure out how to have more money. We just have to tap into that magic of believing. Believing that what we need will be supplied by an ever-ending flow of the universe. Because everything in the universe begins first in our mind. And if you believe it's possible, it can be. And if you believe it's not, guess what? That's what you're going to have. Jesus said it is given to you according to your belief. So we can't create prosperity if we believe in lack. And we all have our own inner inventory. We have those thoughts that we hold on to, like there's not enough, or I have to get mine first, or somebody else will. And that was one of our first homework assignments in the book, and that Reverend Cherie gave to us, was to look at those thoughts that we have about money. Or how about, I need more money, I need more strength, more power, more beauty, whatever it is that we think we need, which means we're not accepting where we are right now in this moment. And as long as we're trying to get where we're not, as long as focusing on what we think is missing, we're never ever going to experience prosperity. You will manifest what you think you need, like the man who thought he needed a job, and you'll get that, but then it won't be what you really need. Jesus said it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom, to give it to you. And so it's up to us to decide how much of that we're going to accept into our lives. And we do that based on our own beliefs. We usually base it on our ego, which has this belief that we're separate, and we're not. Kyle Cease in his book talks a lot about spending your money on things that will invest in you and in your spiritual growth. And that's a tough one for a lot of us. I know I faced that when I made the decision to go to ministerial school. I had worked for the phone company for 21 years. I'd been unhappy for most of it, but I made really good money, and I had good benefits. And I had to give that up at some point in order to go into ministry. I sold my house. I took the money that I made on my house, and that's what paid my living expenses through school. You see, I made a covenant with God. Did you know you can do that? You can make a covenant that says, God, I'm going to do this. I'm going to invest in you. I'm going to invest in me. And I'm going to trust that you're going to take care of my needs. Charles and Myrtle Fillmore did that. God shows us in the Old Testament that he made covenants with people all the time. And Charles and Myrtle Fillmore invested in themselves. They invested in silent unity and in the unity movement and trusted God to take care of them. This was their covenant. We, Charles Fillmore and Myrtle Fillmore, husband and wife, hereby dedicate ourselves, our time, our money, all we have and all we expect to have to the Spirit of truth, and through it to the Society of Silent Unity. It being understood and agreed that the said Spirit of truth shall render unto us an equivalent for this dedication in peace of mind, health of body, wisdom, understanding, love, life, and an abundant supply of all things necessary to meet every want without our making any of these the object of our existence. In the presence of the conscious mind of Christ Jesus, the 7th day of December, AD, 1892. And they went about doing their work, investing in themselves, investing in unity, and God took care of them. So I did that. I quit this job to go to ministerial school, and I was willing to give it up, but it was scary. And I made this covenant with God and just said that I would go about the business of investing in myself, investing in my spiritual growth, and trusting that God would supply my every need. Now, I have to tell you, sometimes I'm successful at that, and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I get stuck in fear. I'm going to share with you a couple of instances where I was in that flow. My first job in ministry was in Bainbridge Island, Washington. When I was in ministerial school, it was in Missouri, and I was born and raised in California. And so I was missing the ocean and the mountains in Missouri. And so I had in my mind that I really wanted to go somewhere where there was oceans and mountains. And I ended up with that in Bainbridge Island, which is right off of Seattle. I should have also said sun, because there wasn't much sun there. But I went there, and I took a church that was a small church, and they didn't have very much money. And I had this desire in my heart to live by the water. Didn't do anything to create that. I just had that desire in my heart. Went about doing my work, rented an apartment downtown that I could afford. It was a great little apartment. It allowed me to walk to town and everything. But I still had this desire in my heart that I wanted to live by the ocean. Well, one day, one of my congregants came to me, and he said he was moving to New Mexico, and he had a condo right on the water. He came from a very wealthy family. His family owned the radio station in town. So he asked me whether I would like to live in this condo rent-free. Well, duh. So I got to live in this beautiful condo. One whole wall was windows that looked out on the water. And not only did I not have to pay rent, I didn't even have to pay utilities. Whew. Now, I had put no real energy into creating that. I had just invested in spirit, invested in myself, went about doing my work. And Spirit provided what was in my heart. It happened again when I moved to Texas. I became the minister of Unity Church of Georgetown, and they were, again, a very small church. They were paying $500 a week. I wasn't sure how I was going to be able to survive on that, but I said yes, and I came here, and I started looking for a place to live, and finding that apartments were pretty expensive. Well, I had some congregants in my church who were from California, and they were renting a place, but they were buying a place, and they were stuck with a year's lease. And so they came up to me and said, we'd like to share this lease with you. How much would you be willing to pay? And they tell you, spend a quarter of your income on housing. So I said $500, and they said, okay. So I got to live in this beautiful house in Sun City for $500 a month. And they carried the rest of the lease and considered it their tithe to the church. Isn't that awesome? I'm convinced that's the way life is supposed to be, all of the time. And again, sometimes I'm in that flow and sometimes I'm not. And when we're in the flow, we're living life from the inside out. We live in an abundant universe. We aren't buying into that lack consciousness, and the universe opens up and provides for us. When you're following your soul's plan and investing in your spiritual journey, God provides. In his book, Kevin gives an example of 3 women, all whom he named Helen, who were all given $1 million. So I ask you, what would you do if you were given $1 million? Well, the first thing I would hope you do is be tithe 10% to your church. But after that, what would you do with it? Think about that for a minute. So he gives the example of these 3 women. So the first woman quit her job immediately. She bought a lush new car. She bought a wonderful place to live, luxury apartment. She paid off all her bills. She began throwing big parties. She was doing things and spending money on things that entertained her and numbed her. But she didn't contribute to her growth as a human being in any way. Now, you can imagine what her life would be like at the end of a year. She probably wouldn't have much of her money left. And she would be the exact same person she was when she was in that unfulfilling job. So the second woman did not quit her job. She was smart. She took the money, she invested it. She made about 10% back on her money. She probably would have a little bit of more money than the first woman at the end of the year. But again, she's still in a job she doesn't like, and she hasn't changed much else in her life. Now, the third woman did something totally different. She quit the job that wasn't bringing her joy and fulfilling her anymore. And she used her free time to learn more about herself. She decided to follow a lifelong passion she had of backpacking through Europe. And so she did that. And in that process, she was learning an awful lot about herself. And then when she came home, she started meditating. She started working on her body. Before long, she was starting a podcast and a YouTube channel to share the things that she had been learning. And she began building a business that would feed her soul. Now, at the end of that year, she might not have had as much money as the second woman who had invested her money. But she's changed, and she's grown, and she's invested in herself. And now she has a life that's bringing her joy, growth, and personal expansion. I can tell you, I made a whole lot more money for the phone company than I ever made in ministry. And no doubt I'd probably be making more in Social Security now too. But I would have continued to be miserable, and I never would have met my husband, Tim. And I can tell you, I feel more prosperous with him than I ever have in my whole life. There was a piece on 60 Minutes a couple weeks ago, maybe you saw it. It was something they were calling the Big Quit or the Great Resignation. And I'm sure you've seen those signs in businesses and restaurants saying help needed. People are having a hard time getting people to work. Something happened when COVID hit. People were forced to leave their jobs, and many of them aren't coming back. 60 Minutes said over 20 million people quit their jobs in the second half of 2021. The number of people leaving their jobs is higher now than ever before. They said, we used to be in a society that was living to work. And people have discovered it isn't worth it. Employers are even offering higher wages, benefits, signing bonuses, and they're still having trouble getting people to come back to work. And they did some research and discovered that many people have found other jobs that fit their life better. And as they said on 60 Minutes, the social contract of work is being rewritten, and workers are holding the pen. So another thing Kyle speaks about in his book is asking us to examine how we spend our time and how we spend our money. Are you doing things that are a 10? You know, if a 1 is, I hate this, and a 10 is, this feels pretty good. Where are you spending most of your time? And he suggests also looking at how you spend your money. Are you spending your money on things that are supporting the 10 activities in your life? Now, I don't know if you make a budget or not. Tim and I use an app called Every Dollar. And every month we budget every single dollar that we spend. And it's interesting to see how we spend our money. And he's getting ready to retire later this year. And so we're having to really look at, how we spend our money. And since the pandemic, we've had to add hobbies to our budget because both of us are doing art and spending money on art supplies. And I'm making a little bit of that money back, selling some of my art. Some of it's in our bookstore. You should check it out. So how are you spending your time? How are you spending your money? Are you doing things that are investing in you, in your personal growth, your spiritual growth? And if not, why not? Are you living your life out of habit? I'm doing this because I've always done it, but is it expanding me? Am I growing as a human being? Now, granted, there are things we do every day that we think we have to do, but you can even change your mindset about that. You have to brush your teeth every day. Well, you brush your teeth because you're keeping yourself healthy. There's a lot of diseases that are caused by not taking care of your teeth. Paying your bills. Nobody likes to pay bills, but when you pay your mortgage, think about the fact that you have a roof over your head. When you're paying your utilities, think about how warm and cozy you are, although it's not quite warm in this sanctuary yet. I'm cold. I don't know about the rest of you. So your homework this week is to examine your life and take note of what you are doing out of habit and what you're doing that is expanding you and contributing to your growth. Now, Kyle, who's the author of the book, talks about how he used to be a stand-up comedian. And he said he could still do that. It's easy, it's effortless, it's fun. But he discovered it wasn't expanding him anymore. So he isn't doing it. So your homework is to look at your life, what you're doing. It's on page 81 in the book if you want to look it up. And rate what you're doing on a scale of 1 to 10. And if you have to justify it, it's probably not a 10. So Kyle says this. He says, we can't create a future that is more abundant, more free, or more fulfilling if we keep repeating all the same habits we've learned from our past. Look for what in your life you are doing that is taking you higher and into a new dimension of growth that feels exciting and maybe even a little scary. If you want more abundance in your life, he says to let go of the things that are taking up space and causing you to hold on to your limiting way of being. You have to remove the things blocking your connection and your creativity. You have to step into the unknown. God bless you.